Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where we talk about stories that we have ideas about with no intention of writing anything after we're done with the episode. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story, or to talk about a story. We're going to be rating our latest story. I had it in my brain. I was like, you got to remember.
A Dream of Truth.
A Dream of Truth. So this is a story that takes place, I guess it could be technically considered a lit RPG, which is a story that centers around or has elements of a video game in it. And I think we've done a lit RPG in the past, or something kind of like a lit RPG. Do you guys remember that one that we did, where there was like game elements in parts of it?
I have a vague,
Vaguely.
Yeah, it was like in space. There was colonizers. There was people were colonizing a planet. Anyways, that's not this story. This story is about people who went into a virtual reality. It wasn't a game. It was an environment to conserve power in their bunker after some great catastrophe, nuclear war, or whatever. And then through a series of events, forgot about the bunker. And then as the reactor began to fail, people started to dream at night, but it was really their bodies waking up and going about doing tasks, and there was hijinks and shenanigans, which eventually led to people leaving the game world in truth and coming into the actual reality with their game avatars, which gave them magic and skill and power and things like that. A real good, I think, beginning. A lot of it, in my opinion, was based on the Play to Live series by D. Roos, which is another lit RPG series, which is very good. It was actually, a lot of people credit it with some of the best, is from what I've read on forums and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone agrees.
Everyone agrees, which is weird because it's Russian. So the fact that we're using Donald Trump's voice to say everyone agrees, Play to Live, best series.
Attack to the experts.
Yeah.
Everyone told me, but I already knew it was the best.
But this world, I think I really liked. So a couple things that I really liked about this world was the three distinct factions. You weren't here for it, Reed, because you missed last episode. But we named the nominal kingdoms, the complacent kingdoms. These were the people who wanted to just stay asleep.
Yeah. And
then there was the lost ones, the ones who had been kind of woken up but were dissatisfied and didn't know how to escape, didn't know what to do with themselves. And then I don't remember the name of the ones who had kind of woken up but were seeking to hurt, steal, kill, and destroy.
Right.
Oh, the disenfranchised?
Yeah. The disenfranchised, right, yeah. So first off, what were your guys' ratings for this one?
Well, I didn't rate it because I didn't know where you guys went with it. So I liked the beginning of it.
Right. So the ending, Reed, was really interesting. What we ended up doing was, do you remember the prophesied child?
Right.
What ended up being was there was a kid that was born into the environment, the virtual environment, but he had brain damage when he was born. And so the AI kind of melded with him to make it so that he could develop semi-normally. But because of that, he was able to edit code on the fly. And he was kind of keeping the world together, so to speak. And what ended up happening is our hero, who was kind of a teleporter, that was like his clinching skill. That was his skill that makes him the hero, makes him different than everybody else. They were able to teleport out of the world, out of the virtual world and into the real world. And then what happened is the prophesied child at the very end, basically, as the virtual world was collapsing because the servers were so burnt out and couldn't handle it anymore, he basically became the server with his own mind and was keeping the world together in some kind of terrifying, disorganized way. And then there was a way so the story kind of ended with a lot of people who had woken up in the game world had come out and were kind of reclaiming the bunker and the surrounding area, but they would travel back into the server to try and rescue people who had been locked in there, including the entire disenfranchised group. So this would really be kind of like a beginning book in a series, and then the next book could either be about going out into the world and it sort of introducing magic to the rest of the world, or going into this kind of chaotic virtual space and trying to rescue people.
Yeah, I had a picture of like, the obvious thing is the Matrix.
Right, absolutely.
But with the machines that were running things had started out to be benevolent as opposed to just
Manipulative, yeah.
indifferent or whatever.
Right, right. I would say that that's the case. I did mention something about how one of the reasons why they got stuck was because the guy who they used to develop the space was, in fact, he did develop video games. And one of the things that he did was he developed it so that people who played it would kind of form that habitual addiction of playing it. So this is one of the several ways in which the world went bad, was that he made it easier and made it more comfortable psychologically to stay in the game than to view it as just an environment.
Right.
And that's just, it's his fault, but he's not the villain.
Right.
It's his fault, but that's just how he makes it. He just makes addictive games, So I personally would probably give it like a 7.5. I would always have been fascinated with lit RPGs, and I would love to write one, but I haven't read enough. I realize. Even this one, I realized as I was thinking about it and thinking about ways to make it cooler and better and more interesting, I was too heavily influenced by the very few lit RPGs that I've read, and the one that I've liked the most being Play to Live. And I don't want to make a Play to Live fan fiction necessarily,
Right.
And that's just why I don't think that I could write it unless I read a bunch more. And also, like, I've never really invested the time it takes to like play an MMO seriously.
What's an MMO?
Massive multiplayer online.
Okay.
Right? So these are games that you log into oftentimes every day to complete daily tasks, and then you join up with guilds, giant groups of people, and do big dungeon raids and, fight big dragons together. I've never done any of that. I've played a little bit here and there for a couple months here and there. But you can tell from the way that D. Roos wrote this one and that other people have written other ones that I have read, these people are familiar with the mechanics that feel familiar with a video game RPG, MMO specifically. RPG being role-play game.
Yeah.
Right. So mine would be 7.5, and I would love to see someone write this, but I don't know that I could. And also, it seems really depressing. I really like post-apocalyptic stories, but I like post-apocalyptic stories that are really far past, like the Shannara series is, and how they're post-apocalyptic, or how Lord of the Rings is post-apocalyptic, or how Wheel of Time is post-apocalyptic. All three of those stories have the same. They have the same style of post-apocalyptic story, but thousands of years have passed.
Yeah, it's like I think of in the Shire. It has always been the same for time out of mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or like the fact that you travel from the Shire to Bree, and then from Bree, you can literally travel thousands of miles in any north, east, or south and never encounter another human being or another person except if you know where Rivendell is.
Yeah.
Right. And Tolkien talks a lot about how it's a world that has been vacated.
Yeah.
And I like that. They stumble across Frodo stumbles across the seeing stone. The seeing, not the stone, but the
seat.
The seat, right? When he gets separated, when he leaves at the falls
right.
and the Anduin. That's like a vestige of an old, Weathertop, vestige of an old thing.
Yeah.
And then the same thing in Wheel of Time. They're traveling out of the waste, I think in Fires from Heaven, but I don't remember which book it is exactly. But they see way up on the mountain, too high for anyone to breathe, like a palace.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's from the Breaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's too high for anyone to get to, but there's probably unknown treasures there, but no one can get there. There it is. The world, this is how much the world has changed.
Yeah.
I enjoy things like that, but the nitty gritty, like right after, would be a really difficult place to live, and I am not yet comfortable enough with the hard and truth facts of human suffering to portray that in a way that I feel like would be accurate.
This is kind of an aside, but do you remember in the Stargate stories, the Teal'c is member of, what was the name of their
Jaffa?
The Jaffa. Do you remember they had those really cool staff weapons that was,
Yeah.
I thought that they were probably inspired by the shock lance from Wheel of Time, from the
Oh, yeah, maybe.
yeah, I've always been fascinated by the weapon, the shock lance. I've pictured it in my mind,
Yeah. One of the things that really caught me up, because I just finished the series a week or so ago. I just finished Wheel of Time. Amazing. Absolutely. Again, I think this is my third time through it. Absolutely amazing. I listened to it this time. I'm going to try and read it next time. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I thought was really interesting was that the bore, Wheel of Time spoilers here, the bore getting broken into,
yeah,
and then the actual sealing of the bore.
Yes.
There was like 200 years between those two periods. It wasn't like breaking, the bore getting bored into, the Dark One getting released, and the next day Louis Theron and the 100 Companions. It was like years. They had to like learn how to sword fight again.
Yeah.
There was like years of time that went in between those two things, which I thought was really interesting. So what's your guys' ratings? You said you didn't have one. Do you have one, Seth? You've read like Play to Live and some of the other JRPGs, so you have kind of a different idea about it.
I was gonna give it about a 7.
Okay,
I think.
Cool.
I mean, I really enjoy the lit RPGs and stuff like that. I think it's kind of interesting, but I'd give it a 7.
That's great. Same.
Well, you were 7.5, but I didn't sway mine based on your half a point higher. But
yeah.
No, I think as far as what I'd have to say about it, I think that like coming into it, and probably like my fault because I was one of the people that contributed to this. But for being what it was, it became more and more that almost everyone was aware of it, but also coming across like not as many people really were aware of it. And so everyone coming in, like everything coming into the story was, what would that be, too OP for like the baseline of what was happening, maybe?
Explain what you mean by that.
Like every single group that was being brought into here was over hyper aware that this is what it was, when the general perspective is that wasn't a common thought process.
Aware of what it was, aware that it was a simulation.
What that was, what the whole thing was, right?
Okay.
Too many people like coming in, too many groups, too many people over aware and manipulating and using that this is what it was and going on, when the overall part of the story would be that wasn't
okay.
the overall
I hear you.
thing, right? You have
most of what was going on was people in the simulation treating it as if it were reality and living in it.
Right. And then they had the dreams that then it was confusing to them, right? But then there became like, I don't know, I might be exaggerating this, but it seemed like 6 different groups and 4 different factions and whole groups that were functioning quite well on a complete knowledge of what it was and some of its manipulations. So and that could just be that's the factions that got focal point, right? Because I don't think that we really paid much attention to, as it were, the idyllic, or is that what you said, the idyllic kingdoms?
Yeah, that's true, I suppose.
Right. And so I think as far as our focus and kind of bringing it towards the end, it was like so many factions that were already aware that this was the not reality, and how do they fit inside of there and function out of it. I would say that would be my biggest like constructive criticism of it. I'd still like to see it done. I mean, out of the ones we've done, I'd put it on one that I'd like to explore because again, like over that, what was it? One of those last ones, I was spending a lot of time going through all the old episodes and categorizing and going through a bunch of stuff. And, so out of all the ones that kind of came up to memory, there's probably 5 or 6 of them that were like, yeah, this is, I really like this, making a note of it to go back and when I get
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Yeah.
to
So
go look at it. I'd love to do something with it. As far as then to kind of wrap up my grading and my inspiration for it, again, like you said, the play to live. If you're into the lit RPG stuff, if you like to play video game like MMORPG stuff, play to live, really good. But I think the other inspirations, as far as that goes, I think especially towards the end, I would say the two things. I think I mentioned it, the game Darker Than Black that we've played sometimes, right? Where you have, it's like, I don't know, this is the way I would see it, and maybe, I don't know, but like that idea that you're going into some other place, right? And you go there, you fight mobs, you kind of collect things, and then you try to get out, right? And you have that timed, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that time frame, right?
Yeah.
Until it kind of messes up or, gets darker and darker, right? And so I had like been mulling in the back of my head, like I'd love to see that as like as a story idea, where you have something, right? Where like that's what they do, like they go into like a separated place to, gather different materials, whatever, and come back out to kind of their, other place that's like, I don't know, somehow landlocked, where to get certain resources or to get, or to travel between different kingdoms, you have to then go through something like that, right? But then you have to get out of it at a certain time. I thought like, okay, how would I do that? And so I think that fit quite well for what this was. And the other inspiration, particularly for the end in how that was, are you guys familiar with Maze Runner?
Vaguely.
So Maze Runner, I think it might have been a book. I don't know. But it was basically Resident Evil, except had a different beginning. And I would say like the beginning was really good, where this guy wakes up and he's in like the middle of this kind of cleared area surrounded by forest. And like he doesn't have any memory. All he remembers is waking up here, right? And then these other people there kind of go, yeah, we all had the same thing. Every month or every couple months, someone else is sent up through this elevator with some supplies, and then someone else, right? And then we're inside of a completely walled in enclosure, and the only way out is this elevator, which only comes up, once a month, or this maze, right? And so they kind of have this little farming community, little village kind of made, because that's all these people keep showing up with no memories except just to kind of be brought in by these other people. And so then what they do is the maze opens at dawn and closes at dusk, right? But it's a maze, it's a labyrinth. And so what they do is they get their fastest runners with the best memory to run into the maze and then like run as much of the maze and get out before
Right.
dusk, because if they're not out by dusk, they never return, right? And so then they have to like see if they can get out of the maze in order to escape whatever this thing that they're in is, right? And so that's kind of what they do, that idea that, something would be opened and it's kind of this maze. It's always like moving around. I don't think it was moving around there. But then what ended up happening with it is it just turned into Resident Evil, right?
Like zombies?
That part had, the Umbrella Corporation tested out a new, I don't know, chemtrail or medication that turned the human population into zombies, and then some people were immune and some people were Resident Evil, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so then like the next three movies, or again, I think it was a book.
It's a
just
book, yeah.
was Resident Evil, right? Some people that had some type of immunity, and then we're trying to like basically go through zombie world and find a cure, get their cure to the civilization that was over here. And then it's like part Mad Maxy kind of going on. And so basically it was like, okay, that thing at the beginning was kind of cool. I like that, but it had really no bearing to the rest of the thing. And I kind of like that. But anyways, I would say that's where I brought some of my inspiration for the...
Yeah, now that I know that Maze Runner is one of the ones you were thinking of, it makes a lot more sense when you were talking about like going back into the place to get supplies and bring them out to where they're at and making a base. I've never read or seen. I've heard of it and I know the vague base premise, but I'm definitely interested. Might be just dystopian enough, or just I didn't really enjoy Hunger Games, which sounds not vaguely similar, but kind of in the same vein as that. Just another take and look at a dystopian world, but that makes more sense to how you were talking last week about it. So that's cool.
Yeah. And so it'd be something that, again, if I had the time, it would definitely be on my list with the other probably 5 that I would really want to do.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I think it would be something that would be, you could do that, and then you could have another one where then you have like that setup, and then you have this one where they're going back in, kind of fighting that other faction that's out here, and kind of carrying on from there and making somewhat of a series of it. But
well, since you started, when you first brought up that notion, Seth, the idea that we missed, too much of what we put in were, I know both of my story elements were interjecting people that were aware of, key players that were aware of the fact that the idyllic kingdom was really just a fantasy, and how to manage, coming to grips with reality all around that. I think it would have been a much better story. My mind has just been going off. Like, can you picture this story that we just had, right? Only the primary, really tell a story replete with an entire cast of characters that live in this fantasy world, with elves and dwarves and men and archers and
wizards
dwarves and wizards and this great
shoemakers and tailors and bakers and okay.
Yeah, and the the whole magic system operating, and like a whole story going on, right? And then dropping in these little seeds of like that, over a period of, with an entirely developed world, right? An entire developed storyline with a cast of characters, and then start dropping in these ruptures, so to speak.
Right.
I think it could really be an interesting epic.
Or even something like, you guys have both read the Ender's Game, Orson Scott Card, Andrew Wiggin, that series, all the way through to let's see, it's Ender's Game, Speaker for the Dead, Children of the Mind, Xenocide, I think is.
Yeah.
Xenocide or whatever.
I think that was the last one, and I've read the Bean side up to.
Right.
I know he did 1 or 2 more that I have not read.
Yeah, I need to read those as well.
Kind of tied them together.
What if you did something like that, where you first had like an idyllic story, and then from one side, and not to say like who's the bad, not to ask the question of who's the bad guy, but you have like a beat cop level investigator work as an elf working for the Guild of Magic, who's like trying to figure out why this old woman like has so much power.
Yeah.
And you have this whole story, and they go to war against these hordes of goblins and orcs who are coming off the it's the end of the world, and there's fire raining from the sky, and there's like a weird prophecy child, and they're trying to find him, and they never do.
Yeah.
And it's like this whole story that seems complete, and then you write a story with the dreams. It has the dreams and everything, but it doesn't really talk about them. And then you have a story from a different person's perspective who has an inkling, which is the exact same story, the exact same timeline, except with an inkling. And then you have a story from someone else, and then you get more of an inkling. And then you have the exact same timeline of the story from the hero who discovers it. And then you have a story from the wise old woman who knows everything from the beginning. And then you can basically take these, 3 books, 3 series, or whatever, and line them up, and maybe even chapter by chapter, read it from her perspective, read it from I keep thinking of the Nominal Nation, but that's not the name of them. The old ones, the idyllic. You can read them chapter for chapter and compare the exact same things that are going on from different points of view, and then actually get a perspective of how this whole thing went down according to how much you knew.
Yeah.
And then you could read one from the idyllic book, one chapter from the idyllic book, and then chapter 2 from the Lost Ones book, and see where that person who slipped away from the sheriff, where he went to, because then the second chapter, the main character of the second chapter of the Lost Ones book, that character shows up because he disappears from the world and comes to the Lost Ones camp, and then they see him for a little bit. And then you read chapter 3 in the Heroes book, and he meets up with him. And pretty soon this is maybe way too complicated, but pretty soon you have a book that you can read it. You can read this 5 books, interplacing, not every single chapter, but interplacing different chapters. And you can track. My brother was thinking about rewriting the Wheel of Time, not rewriting it, but basically taking the Wheel of Time and editing it down so the only perspective you saw was Rand al'Thor's perspective.
Yeah.
And then you do it again with Matron Cawthon's perspective.
Yeah.
And then again with Perrin's. And so you don't get any of the other information. You just get what they see. And then one from Egwene, and then one from Nynaeve, and then one from Lan Mandragoran.
Yeah.
And even one from Moraine, which would be much shorter, but would still be like, to really put yourself in that person, that's maybe way too complicated. But I definitely take that. I definitely take your meaning, Seth, and I think that your idea is really good too, Reed.
I
agree. I think that, what's it?
Go ahead.
No, I think that would be a great way to do it. I'm like making a note of that right now, that like that would be the way to do it. I think also on that, it would be the villain's sidekick or villain really from it. It would be interesting to also have one from that one where you see his perspective, but from his perspective, he's not a bad guy, right? He's aware of it, trying to establish a thing, right? And so some of the things that seem evil, and he truly would be evil, right? But it would be like one of those, right? I'm doing some bad things for a better purpose, right? I have to call off people that aren't worthwhile. This is for the sake of humanity, right? All this other stuff that from his perspective, he's trying to set up this other place for people to be outside and survive. But also you see then his perspective is skewed, right? You as the reader could be like, this guy's got some sick ideas, right?
Yeah.
But being written from his perspective, being like,
in the same way,
can't you see I'm trying to help?
Someone might farm gold on World of Warcraft to sell it for in-game money 8 hours a day and say, I'm not hurting anyone, because it's like fake gold. He could have that detachment from the game because it's like a game. I can just take a big pile of rock and an alchemist can come over and transmute it all to gold, and then I can transfer that to my world and no one's getting hurt, right? And that's a justification that you can use. Or you can also say, well, these people are asleep. We tried to wake them up. They want to be asleep.
Yeah.
That's their lot.
They want the blue, what? They want the blue pill.
Right, exactly.
I was thinking while you guys were talking, like there was part of the this is really bad. I'm sitting here looking at the bookshelf. Stephen King, the
Dark Tower series?
Yeah, the Gunslinger. The one story where they came to the city to get on the rapid transit thing, Blaine, the big monorail.
Blaine the Mono.
Blaine
yeah,
pain.
but the city is like old newspapers are like blowing, and there's dust, and it's clearly something has gone wrong. And then you have the whole book, The Stand, which is just literally spinning off of that.
Oh, right.
You see?
Yeah.
See what I mean? And then I was thinking of like, I don't know if you guys read the Dragon Riders of Pern series. They had I've read like 5 or 6 books that were literally just spin-offs. One was just all about the bards, that whole subculture within their greater society, that was ancillary to the Dragon Riders. And then you had the guys that bred runner beasts, and their whole thing was, they were protected by the Dragon Riders, but their reality was just making a go of it, in the world. And you know what I mean? They had these different story tracks that would be parallel to stories you'd already read from the perspective of the Dragon Riders.
Yeah, that's a thing that is so true in reality, because I was at church today, and I was standing in the back because all the pews were filled. And I was sitting there watching the priest do his priest things. And I was sitting there, and there was a guy next to me, and he was dressed much nicer than me. And I looked over at him, and immediately, pray for me, I'm a sinner. I immediately began judging him because he was dressed nicer than me. So clearly, not like, I wasn't like he's much more spiritual than me, but it was like, here's a person who's trying way too hard, right? And I immediately put him into the category of this person isn't real.
Right.
This person is just a thing. Mm-hmm. And it sounds so selfish and narcissistic of me to say, but it's a terrifying realization when you realize that everyone's life is as vivid and as complex as your own.
Yes.
With all of its own things going on. Mm-hmm. It's easy to forget that, especially when you play video games. Like I bartend sometimes, and there's often times where I feel like an NPC. I sit there cleaning a glass for 2 hours, waiting for someone to come in so I can look up at them and say, hello, traveler, what's the news?
Yeah.
And they can open the menu and order a beer from me, and I'll get it for them, and then I'll be there to just do whatever it is they need, to talk to them about anything at all. Mm-hmm. And you get this kind of disassociating thing about yourself when you're just in that kind of NPC space.
Right.
But the reality is that everyone is sort of vividly experiencing life. And that's one of the things you didn't hear Reed last week, is that the AI started to, in our story, the AI started to overcompensate because the dissatisfied nation, the dissatisfied people were using necromancy to create an army. And so the AI compensated by inserting a bunch of NPCs into the idyllic nations.
Ooh.
Just farmers and tradespeople and who just didn't have... And that was one of the things that started making people wake up, because for a while, for years, there had been no NPCs. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the town started growing in size, and there were people there, but there was no light behind their eyes.
Yeah.
They were just there to fulfill a task, and that's one of the things that made people start waking up. But that's an interesting, I really like that. And I'm so glad, Seth, that you put that in your list of things to possibly work on, because I have this dream now of 5 short novellas, right, which go through each person's perspective of this task. And each of them are written separately. But then you can take them after the 5th one's released. You can actually take them, copy and paste, and put them all together to form a novel of a bunch of different people's perspectives. But they're released separately so that you get each person's personality in a vacuum and kind of understand their thought process. And then you read them together, and then you start to realize, oh, this person thinks this way, and this is how it kind of affects someone else,
I think that would be the way that would be a project that would probably, I'm saying this, and not even started on it yet, but it would be, doing like 5 short stories that then come together as a full story, where you could then write this one, write that one, do this one, more as that short story, right?
Right,
and
absolutely.
Then you would just split the different perspectives like you would have in a regular book, where the perspective is changing to the different characters, but then you could, for the sake of just starting out working on it, do the short story of each of the different kind of perspectives there, at a time, and then edit them together.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, do you guys have anything else to say about this episode, or should I wrap it up? These episodes?
Aside from Reed's rating on what he thought, or what he thought that, from what we've said, or what he, liked or didn't like about it, rating wise.
Yeah, like the start, I liked the start. I was really stuck last Sunday, or the last time we recorded, and I wrote in my notes, just drawing blank. I had random insert as my story element, and I just didn't have anything to contribute. And I was stuck. And I was seeing that this is a great story. It has a lot of really good elements in it, but I didn't know where to go with it. So I would have been going in. The reason I wrote no rating, because I was predisposed to write a 5-ish sort of rating, just because
Right.
I didn't see it. So I thought I purposely said, I'm not rating this because I don't know where you guys went with it. But the more you talked about it, the more interested in the story I got. And I wouldn't, I would be up there in the 7.5, just because based on the strength of what you guys were saying.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, I think this is one of our higher rated stories so far. I mean, since we started rating them, so that's good. Well, Seth, we look forward to hearing all about your story and how you started working on it next week. That's a joke.
We'll see.
Yeah. There'll be water if God wills it. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. We will join you next week with a new, fresh story straight off the griddle. It's going to be a good one. We're going to make it, actually, we're going to come up with it live in front of your very eyes. Not live, but it'll be live for us. If you have any questions about this story or other stories we've written, any constructive criticism about how we write things, how we talk about things, about how we don't pronounce something correctly, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Our email address is waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Our Twitter handle is @getsbettercast. We will see you guys next week. Bye.